You're listening to live courtroom coverage of the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell from the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today. Now, back to the courtroom.
And then who would be the person in your department who would send those out for testing?
Well, any detective or officer could send anything out for testing.
Okay, it doesn't have to be the case agent.
It doesn't have to be, no.
So you being the person who actually extracted them from the vehicle, you could say, hey, let's test these.
I could, yes.
And you did not.
No additional testing was done, no, that's correct.
And why not? Why did you not request additional testing?
I don't know. What wasn't anything that came up for me to do.
So were you just under the impression that it was an actual bullet hole?
I don't know. Can you rephrase your question?
So you didn't test those because you assumed that it was a bullet hole and those were fragments from a bullet?
The damage on the vehicle is consistent with a penetration mark from a firearm and a bullet. The fragments located also appeared consistent to me with fragments from a bullet. That's my observation.
Could it have been from any other thing?
Yes, it's possible.
Like, could you have hit it with a tire iron?
Hit what with a tire iron?
The vehicle.
I guess I'm not sure I understand your question.
Could it not be a bullet hole at all? Could it have been hit with a tire iron?
The damage to the vehicle appeared consistent to me to be, again, a penetration point from a firearm and a bullet. There wasn't nothing that I observed to that damage to lead me to believe that it was anything else than being struck by a projectile.
But it could have been something else.
I don't think so. I think from my experience that the damage and what I observed is consistent with a penetration point from a firearm and a bullet.
The court reporter and clerk and staff are overdue for a break, so let's take a short 10-minute recess and then we'll go through to the rest of the day. Please remember the admonition.
All rise for the jury.
All right. We'll be at recess. Do you have enough to go through till 4:30? Do you have enough to go?
Do we need to put anything on the record?
Okay. Nothing from the defense? I'll issue the other order about the medication.
Okay.
Okay.
All rise for the jury.
All right. Please be seated when you get to your seats. The jury is present. The defendant can continue cross-examination.
Sergeant McDermott, when you got a hold of the Jeep, did you do any further trajectory analysis on it?
I'm sorry, you're referring to the Jeep?
Correct.
I never got hold of the Jeep.
You didn't go to observe the Jeep at all?
I did not.
Okay. Do you know who did go observe the Jeep?
Detective Pillar, Detective Olzak.
And were you ever made aware of any measurements of the Jeep?
No, I was not.
Did you measure the Tesla?
I don't believe any measurements were done concerning the Tesla.
Like how tall it is, how many inches?
No.
Would you be surprised that it's 68 inches tall?
Objection, relevance, speculation.
He can answer.
I don't know how tall the Jeep is. I'm sorry. I don't know how tall the Tesla is.
Would you be surprised that the Jeep is 66 inches tall?
Objection, speculation. He has nothing to do with the Jeep. Relevance.
He already said he didn't observe the Jeep. I'll sustain the objection.
So the trajectory where you stuck the rod into, we looked at the picture, that was you that stuck the rod into the Tesla?
I didn't personally stick the rod into the Tesla, no.
Okay, you did not do the trajectory testing.
I did not stick the rod into the Tesla. There was no additional trajectory testing, if you will, completed.
Were you there when we looked at the picture? Were you there to observe that rod being put into the Tesla?
Yes.
And who did insert that rod into the Tesla?
I don't recall. I know it wasn't me, though.
But you observed it.
I was present when that particular rod was inserted, yes.
And from your understanding, they were testing trajectory. Is that correct?
I think, yes, that's a fair statement. We were trying to get another visualization of where we suspected that the projectile had come from based upon where the vehicle was located at.
So in all of your information that you're going on is basically information provided to you by Mr. Boudreaux.
I guess, can you clarify a little bit more what you mean by all of my information?
So your information on where the Jeep was, where the Tesla was during the shot is all from Mr. Boudreaux. Is that correct?
Mr. Boudreaux provided a statement to us. The physical evidence on scene was consistent with his statement to law enforcement.
Are you a trajectory expert?
I'm not.
Is there one on your team?
I guess, can you clarify my team?
Your department, I'm sorry. Is there one in your department, the Gilbert Police Department, that you know of? Someone who's a trajectory expert?
I can't speak specifically for any of our crime scene techs that the Gilbert Police Department employs. I don't know what their specific training is reference trajectory. I don't know in terms of any other detectives in terms of their specific training. I can't answer that question accurately. I'm not familiar enough with their training.
Okay. So there's no one that you would say, oh, we have to ask Detective so-and-so because he's an expert in trajectory?
I don't possess that knowledge currently to say that, no.
Okay. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Let's talk about the physical evidence at the scene. The bullet hole in the Tesla. Was this, well, let me ask you this. You were asked a hypothetical by the defendant of someone hitting the Tesla with a tire iron or something. Why would that not make sense for what you saw?
As I had mentioned earlier, the damage to the Tesla that I observed was consistent with a penetration point from a projectile, consistent with a projectile from a firearm, just based on my observation and experience.
When you are looking at that, are you looking at the indentation to the metal on the vehicle?
There was indentation on the metal, on the vehicle frame. There was a scuff mark inside the frame of the vehicle that was also consistent with a projectile striking it, as well as some metal fragments we located which were all consistent with the information we received in terms of a gunshot being fired.
The fragments inside, or that you located in that rubber molding, were those sort of copper colored? Let me find a photo of them 1 second. Exhibit 41. And I can provide you 190 if you need that.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I can have my paralegal approach with 190. Having looked at Exhibit 41 and 190, did you observe copper on that?
Yes.
When you are talking about a fragment of a bullet, is that one of are bullets often wrapped in a copper around the actual projectile?
Some projectiles can be wrapped in a kind of a copper casing, yes.
So you were asked whether or not anything in this, when looking at these fragments, if they could have been pieces of the Tesla. As you pulled apart that molding and looked through the hole into the frame of it, did you observe anything else in that Tesla that looked like these type of copper fragments?
Inside the Tesla, I'm sorry to clarify.
Sure. When you pulled down that molding and you're looking through the hole, the projectile hole, and trying to find these fragments, did you notice anything else in that area that seemed consistent with these being part of the Tesla?
No.
In your experience in 18 years having fired guns and collected projectiles and projectile fragments from scenes, is this what a projectile fragment looks like?
Yes.
So there's nothing in the Tesla that looks like that, and this is exactly what you see as a fragment in your experience?
Yes, that's correct.
So when we're talking about the physical evidence at the scene, we're talking about the actual bullet hole into the car?
Yes.
That in your experience and training is consistent with and looks like other projectile holes you've seen?
Yes.
And when we talk about the physical evidence, we're talking about the fragments?
That's one part of the physical evidence, correct.
And those were located with that bullet hole in the Tesla?
That's correct.
So when you're talking about what this projectile was from and what made this hole, are you looking at both of those things and saying this is made by someone shooting at the car?
Yes, the totality of the evidence is consistent and makes sense with, again, a penetration point from a projectile from a firearm.
When you talk about the physical evidence as well, are you looking at the windshield itself?
Well, we looked at the windshield. We also looked at the driver's side window where that penetration point was located at.
In terms of the glass that was located on the driveway, was that mostly, I'll call it, held together by the window tint?
Yes, there was a film that was keeping the shape somewhat intact.
The shards that you observed in the Tesla as well as around that window, were they of the same sort of color and some of them of the same sort of shape as the one you saw out in the street?
Yes, it appeared consistent.
You were asked whether or not you searched the garage. Did you have any information that anything had happened in the garage?
No.
So other than there being a garage to this house, the shooting didn't occur there, to the best of your knowledge?
Correct. There was no evidence to suggest that there was anything that had, any part of the scene had anything to do with the garage of that residence.
You were asked about whether or not the only information that said this shooting occurred was from Brandon Boudreaux. Do you agree with that?
That was information we received from Mr. Boudreaux, but the physical evidence on scene was also consistent with a shooting.
And did you ever become aware of a neighbor also putting a Jeep in the same location that Brandon Boudreaux had indicated it was?
Yes, I had learned that later.
Did you interview Brandon Boudreaux?
No.
So what you heard would be information either relayed to you in the briefing or later learning through Detective Pilar?
Correct.
You were asked about testing those projectile fragments. Did you have a rifle or gun to compare them to?
No.
In your experience, in your training, have you generally submitted projectiles or projectile fragments to try to compare them to see if they came from a gun?
Yes, we have submitted projectiles more completely. I don't have any personal experience in submitting fragments, personally.
Did you have any doubt when you saw those that those were fragments from a projectile?
I did not.
Did you have any doubt when you saw that hole that was a hole from a bullet or projectile entering into that Tesla?
No, I did not.
In terms of the trajectory, you've indicated that detectives, not yourself personally, put a rod into that projectile hole, correct?
Correct.
What was the purpose of doing that?
Again, as I'd indicated earlier, just another visual representation to kind of show what we believe to be in terms of the information provided on scene by Mr. Boudreaux of this rod being inserted into that penetration point to give another visual representation that it was consistent that the direction in which this bullet came from, again, without repeating it too much, was consistent with the information that we had.
Okay. So the projectile, the rod showed that it was coming in sort of, I don't have my pen anymore, but sort of into the front of that Jeep frame. I guess it would have been consistent with a vehicle being here shooting at him. Let me put it that way.
Yes, the penetration point and the evidence, specifically the damage to the Tesla that Mr. Boudreaux was driving, proceeding westbound on Phelps with a vehicle, which he indicated was the Jeep, positioned on the south side of the roadway, facing west as well. A gunshot coming from that vehicle, the Jeep, east towards Mr. Boudreaux as he's driving westbound. That information was consistent with the damage to the Tesla of this penetration point, again, which was penetrating from west to east into the vehicle. That information was consistent with the physical evidence we observed on scene.
Thank you. I have no other questions.
Are there any questions for this witness from any member of the jury? Not seeing any, sir, you can step down.
If I may go get my
Go
next
ahead.
witness.
Yes.
Thank you. David Ferrer.
All right, sir, come on up. You're going to stand right up here in front of my clerk. She'll swear you in.
Hello. Can you please state and spell your first and last name?
Sure, it's David Ferrer, F-R-E-R-E-R.
Thank you. You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Around the court reporter of the ring.
Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, my name is David Ferrer. I'm a detective with the Gilbert Police Department, and I have been with the police department for about over 20 years now. Right now, I'm assigned to the Violent Crimes Unit, which investigates anything with violence, homicides, armed robberies, and that type of thing.
Can you tell us the different areas you have worked while working for the Gilbert Police Department?
Absolutely. I started with patrol. I did that, and then I went to become a school resource officer in the high school, which was a great gig. And then I was assigned by the chief as an internal affairs detective. I did that for 2 years, and then I tested and I made it to the Violent Crimes Unit.
How long have you been in the Violent Crimes Unit?
Since about 2019.
On October 2nd of 2019, were you in the Violent Crimes Unit?
I was.
How long had you been there at that time?
I would say since July of that year.
Were you part of the detectives who were called out to 3875 East Phelps Street in Gilbert?
I was.
When you arrived, can you describe for us what you saw, what the scene looked like?
Sure, detectives get called out a little bit later, so the scene is usually secure. When I pulled up, I recognized that there was yellow police tape around the scene, or at least a portion of it. There was police officers with their marked vehicles in the area.
When you got to the scene, were you briefed or given any information about what it was you were there for?
Yes, we usually receive a briefing from either the case officer that's there on scene or a detective that is right there before I did.
Okay. And what did you understand you guys were investigating there?
What I was told was a gentleman was coming home to his house. When he was getting ready to pull into his driveway, he was shot at. He quickly left the area and called 911.
What was your role at this scene?
I usually just, this time I filled the gaps where it needed to be. So I took photographs. I collected any evidence that was there at the scene, coordinated with the case detective, Detective Pillar.
Did you work with Detective McDermott?
I did.
And did you ever work with Detective Biggs?
Yes, I did.
While you were there, did you see the Tesla?
I did. By the time I got to the residence, the Tesla was parked in the driveway and the doors were open.
When you, let me ask you this. In your time as a police officer, have you seen bullet holes in vehicles before?
Yes.
And can you tell us, as a either detective or patrol officer, did you ever have any training on, let's start first with processing crime scenes?
Yes, I attended the crime scene and advanced crime scene.
And what is the crime scene and advanced crime scene?
Crime scene can mean many, many things, from photographs to collecting latent prints, trajectory, blood spatter.
Okay. So when you saw this Tesla in the driveway, did you observe or look at a defect in the car?
Yes.
I'm going to put up, starting with Exhibit 26. Where did you notice this defect?
That was the driver's side, right above the door or the window.
And when you observed this, I'm going to put up Exhibit 30. What did you believe this to be?
That is consistent with a bullet hole or a projectile that would go through metal.
Why did you determine that this was from a bullet?
Well, we look at the totality of the circumstances, what's being told to us, what's being reported. According to the victim here, he said that he was shot at because he saw a weapon. And so that's what we are taking it as, is a bullet hole. It does have the consistency of a bullet hole. You can see the clean that goes into the metal.
When you say clean that goes into the metal, what do you mean by that?
Well, a bullet is very hot when it comes through, projectile. And when it comes through, it can go through metal pretty easily. Depends on the round or the type of, it's either handgun or rifle. This is a larger hole. With the melting around, you can see around the sides. So I would assume with the victim saying he was shot at, that's where the bullet hole would have been.
When you are looking at a scene, are you also looking to the physical evidence to tell you whether or not this is in fact a bullet hole?
Yes, we look at the bullet hole or the hole, see if there's any evidence, maybe pieces of projectile, any type of, could be a casing on the ground or any of that type of stuff. That's what we're looking for as far as a bullet hole or damage to a vehicle.
So in this case, the shape of this hole and the clean that you described told you that this was from a projectile striking and going into this vehicle?
After we found the projectile, pieces of the projectile also.
So in addition to the shape and clean of the hole, you also looked to the physical evidence of the actual projectile fragments?
That is correct.
Were you present when those were found?
Yes, I was.
And we see here in Exhibit 40, is this sort of some molding that was along the frame of that Tesla?
Yes.
Just, I guess, a little to the rear of the bullet hole itself?
Yes.
And in that molding were projectile fragments recovered.
Yes, and that is one right there.
When you looked at these fragments, what told you they were projectile fragments?
Well, the consistency of what a metal, I'm not a metallurgy by any means, but this would be consistent to what a projectile looks like after it has been struck, something of hard metal. There's also, there could be some jacketing left on the projectile also. Could be markings, so we're looking for all of that.
Do you look sometimes to see, for instance, if there's anything like a copper on the fragments?
Yes.
In this case, do you recall if there was copper on the fragments?
Yes, I believe there was.
In your training and experience, having worked as an officer for over 20 years and having seen other projectile fragments, was what you and the other detectives found in that molding consistent with all the other projectile fragments you'd ever found?
Yes, they all are similar in shape and size and color.
And in your training and experience, when a bullet hits something hard like a metal, have you on other occasions seen projectiles fragment like that?
Yes. And that depends a lot on the bullet itself.
So depending on the bullet and what it hits changes if it fragments or not.
That is correct.
In this case, though, knowing this went through metal, were you surprised to see it fragmented?
No.
In this investigation, did you help canvass the scene to try to find any residents who might have cameras that might be around to show anything?
Yes, and that's a normal practice.
In doing that, did you find anyone who had any cameras that showed anything?
There were people with cameras, but they didn't catch. Sometimes the cameras don't go all the way to the roadway. It's just to their walkway for their own purposes.
Okay. Did you help in any way with searching the roadway to try to recover any other pieces of those fragments?
Yes, but searching for fragments on a roadway is very difficult. We even brought out a metal detector to try, but we're talking about a vast area because the victim actually drove away from the scene. So some of the projectile could have been left in the vehicle until he left. He turns a corner, he speeds up, slows down, it could have fallen out. So it was very difficult to find anything else on a roadway that large or a scene that large.
And you're talking about what could be small little pieces.
Very small.
So although you guys attempted to follow the path that Brandon had expressed he'd driven,
Yes, we did.
did you locate anything?
No.
As a detective in the Violent Crimes Unit, do you often help other detectives with sort of follow-up work?
Yes.
So if they need a little help executing a search warrant or doing something like that, you might get tasked with that?
Absolutely.
So in addition to helping to work this scene and helping to process the Tesla, were you asked later on in December 23rd of 2019 to help execute a search warrant on a Ford F-150 that was owned by Alex Cox?
Yes, I was.
Where was that search warrant executed? Where did you, I guess, process and search through the vehicle?
The Gilbert Police Department has a property building, and it's a very large parking lot for vehicles. And there are 2 fully covered bays that we actually can bring our vehicles into to keep us kind of out of the weather. It's very hot in Arizona, obviously, so it's very hard to search out in the middle of a parking lot. So these bays are air conditioned, and we were able to close the doors, and that's what we did at 2750 East Williamsfield Road, and that's in Gilbert.
So were you tasked on December 23rd of 2019 to help execute a search warrant on a Ford F-150 that was owned by Alex Cox?
Yes, I was.
Were photographs taken during that search warrant?
Yes.
Shown the defendant exhibits 112 through 118, if I can have my paralegal approach. If you can take a look at those and let me know if you recognize those photographs.
Yes, I do.
And are those photographs that were taken during that search warrant on December 23rd?
Yes, what usually happens is we'll have a crime scene technician who will, when we start the warrant, they will take overall photographs before we even search the vehicle, before we even touch the vehicle. So that was where a lot of those photographs came from. Once that is completed, and sometimes they search for DNA, they swab the insides of the vehicle. Then once that is all finished, then I will actually go in to the vehicle to search it.
State will move to admit exhibits 112 through 118.
No objection.
112 through 118 are admitted.
So in 112, do we just see, I guess, photographs are taken of the exterior of the vehicle, like you said?
Yes.
So 113 and then 114, does that show the rear and the license plate of this truck?
Yes.
So it was a personalized plate, CPQUINT?
Yes, and when you first showed me those pictures, I've searched a lot of vehicles, So the first couple pictures show the truck, but once I see the license plate, I remember that license plate specifically because it is personalized.
Okay. So in this Jeep, did you look inside to see if you could find a registration?
It was the F-150 I searched.
Uh-huh.
And yes, I found the registration, and it was all those items that were photographed were found in the middle console in between the driver and passenger seat.
Okay, so in Exhibit 116, we see that this vehicle is registered to Alexander Lamar Cox.
That is correct, and that is that truck. We do match it with the VIN.
Okay. And this was from 4/8 of 2019.
Well, that's when
That was printed at least.
yeah.
Did you find inside a letter from Chad Daybell to Alexander Cox?
Yes, I did.
Did you find inside this vehicle any evidence of gun ownership?
Yes. And in the picture, you can see
And I'm going to put up 117. Is that a closer up of one of the items?
much better.
What is that?
That is a practice bullet. When you're loading your gun, it will help you dry fire. Because when the chamber of a weapon is empty, it usually will not fire unless it has something in there. So that's what we use for this type of thing. It's a 223 round, so that means it's going to be a rifle. And this is just a practice round, so you'll be able to cock the gun however it is, and it will load so you can pull the trigger. And that's usually for help aiming the rifle.
And then did you also find some earplugs in there?
Yes, and that's common for when you go to the range or even at the Gilbert Police Department when we shoot our qualifications. We are issued some earplugs just like that, the orange.
And did you impound all those items?
I did.
The state has no further questions for this witness.
All right, Ross.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead and start.
Detective Farrar, when did you arrive on the scene that day? Do you remember?
I do not.
Who was there when you arrived?
I believe Detective Pillar, Detective McDermott. I arrived with Detective Biggs.
Okay. Did you see Officer Robb there when you arrived?
I believe she was there.
And what did you do when you first got there?
This was several years ago, but it would be normal for me to get a quick briefing to see what happens and what needs to be done.
Okay, and who briefed you?
I can't recall, but it's usually either a patrol officer or it could be the a case detective.
Which was Detective Pillar?
Yes,
Okay. And is it Pillar or Pillar?
Pillar.
Okay. And do you don't remember if it was Detective Pillar who was the one who briefed you?
I'm sorry, I do not.
Okay. But you were briefed to what did the briefing consist of?
What basically crime we had, what had occurred at the scene, and if there was any evidence on scene to start with.
And did you observe other people at the scene as well?
Yes, there were several officers, and I do remember the victim was with a few other friends, I believe, but they were outside the crime scene.
And where was the victim and his friends located when you saw them?
They were outside the crime scene.
Can you tell us where that was in the neighborhood?
Well, it was visible from the actual house, so Crime scene was across the road, I'd say maybe 50 yards away from us.
Okay. Just sitting or standing or hanging out?
I think they were just staying there until Detective Pillar was going to go question them.
You had mentioned that Brandon told his story, and then someone briefed you about it. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then you took photos? Is that
I
correct?
took, yes, some photos, yes.
How many photos do you think you took?
I don't recall.
A lot?
I don't have an answer for that, I'm sorry.
More than 20?
Yes,
Okay. Less than 100?
probably.
Okay.
I am not sure.
And then you said you collected evidence. What evidence did you collect?
I stood by and I received the projectiles that were removed from the Tesla.
And they went into an evidence bag?
Yes.
And then they were delivered where?
We take them to the Gilbert Police Department. We have a property room there. We can itemize it and seal it and store it in a locked container.
And someone's in charge of that? It's logged in, I guess?
Yes, every piece of property that is taken in has its own unique identifying number. It's unique for the Gilbert Police Department as Mesa, or the other people would have their own unique numbers also.
Okay. So it would basically consist of like the log having its number, the name, the date, or something consistent with that?
Yes, consistent with that, yes.
Okay. And did they remain there until now when they're here? Or,
They would stay in storage until a detective or somebody checks it out.
okay. And that would probably be the case agent would check them out to bring them to court?
Yes, that's
Okay.
the normal procedure.
And then, do you know if any of those projectiles were tested?
Tested?
Yeah. To be consistent with a handgun or a rifle?
I don't believe so.
Okay. And who would do that testing if they were tested? Who would
We-
send that out?
We would send that out.
So you could do it?
No, we would send it out to a scientist or a forensic scientist of some sort.
Okay. But I'm saying you could be one to say, hey, we should test this.
Yes, I believe so, yes. If we believe there's evidence in it,
Or the case agent could send it out.
yes,
Anyone could request it, is what you're saying.
true.
And did anyone request that?
I am not aware of that.
And did you specifically request that?
I did not.
Okay. You mentioned something about it being large, the bullet hole. How large was it? I had a picture.
Well, you could see in the pictures, I would say approximately, it's been a while, but I'd say approximately maybe 2 inches by 2.5, something in that frame.
Okay. I saw that there was a measuring tape on there that had about 2 inches on it, but it was
Okay.
much smaller than that.
Okay.
Would you say it was more than the size of a dime?
Well, we'd have to look at the photographs if you have them with the, I can
Okay.
give you a better understanding of the size.
You had mentioned that you had searched for casings on the ground. Is that correct?
We look for casings or projectiles, yes.
Did you find any casings anywhere?
No.
Would that be common?
To not find?
Correct.
It all depends.
Where would a casing go, is my question.
There is no scientific way we know which would come out of a gun. We know either right or left, but as far as it leaving the gun, it could bounce, hit anything. There's just a million other things it could do to end up anywhere.
Okay. And you mentioned that you had brought in a metal detector. Would that detect a casing?
It would pick up a casing sound, yeah.
And what was the area where the metal detector was used to try to find some kind of metal or casing? How large, would you say?
Well, we tried the window itself that had shattered out around the vehicle, where the vehicle first came in. We walked the roadway
In the street?
in the street, yes.
maybe all of the blocked off area from the police tape?
Yes, and I believe that some detectives might have went to the park, walked up to the ground of the park, where we believe that's what the victim told us he went to call 911.
Okay. And then, did anyone go past those markings, like where perhaps Mr. Boudreaux had said that he saw the Jeep following him? Like that another shot may have been executed?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
In looking for casings on the ground or in that area, was that search expanded beyond where the police tape was?
Yes.
So would it go all the way to where Mr. Boudreaux would have said that the Jeep passed him? Looking for further casings, I mean.
Yes.
Okay. But none were found?
None.
Unless you just have a couple more, we should probably break and get the jury to the jury bus.
Okay, Your Honor.
Do you have a couple more, or should we break?
I have more than that.
Okay, let's recess for the evening. Members of the jury, remember, we're going to start early tomorrow. Please be here ready to go at 9:30 a.m., 9:30 a.m. I appreciate it. Please remember the admonition. You can step down if you like. All right, everyone can be seated. Proposed language you had about administering meds.
Yes, I think the language, it's the KOP Tylenol that needs to be brought over. You write that down? The KOP Tylenol?
KOP stays in jail unless, you know,
He's in order to be brought over.
has to be a jail commander or captain to approve it to come here.
Can you do it if it's ordered?
No, the jail has to approve it over there. I don't bring it from the jail.
What I'm saying is, can it be administered by someone from your office during
No.
lunch?
That's the nurse or CHS.
Which she doesn't bring it herself, Judge.
Unless it says her name on it and it's on her, then she can take it herself. If it's
That's what they said.
So they can send her with her?
With it, yes, I just
Okay,
bring
it's
it.
order directing CHS to provide her with a necessary dose of KO what?
It's keep on person. They call it KOP.
Okay. that makes
So just that she's allowed to bring her KOP with her to court each day.
All right, so
Something to that
keep
effect.
on her person a dose necessary for the full day to be at trial tomorrow. We'll try to email a copy of that to the sheriff's office as well as CHS. All right. Anything else from the state,
No, Your Honor.
from the defense?
Just need an updated list on who will be tomorrow. I know we still have Brandon and to finish with this witness, but the next witnesses.
Well, obviously, I'll work on that since I have a very different schedule than I initially
All right.
did. I will email it over tonight.
Okay, we're trying to juggle that witness so she'll know.
Your Honor, if it gets emailed over, then I don't get it. I will not be aware of it.
All right. Do you want to give her a heads up of at least a couple of witnesses you plan to call?
Well, that requires me to call people, Your Honor, so I don't,
What's that?
that requires me to call people. I usually go back to my office and contact people. I know that, I don't know how long the defendant's going to take. I usually obviously email after I determine who I'm calling. I now know I have 2 witnesses coming back, so it changes my schedule.
Okay, we have the detective that was just on the witness stand that needs to be completed. We have Mr. Boudreaux that
Correct.
hopefully can get completed tomorrow. Do you have an idea of any other witness?
That's my point, Your Honor. I have to then see who else I can move because now the morning is full, so I'm going to have to check with witnesses to see if they are available later in the day.
Okay.
So
Your Honor, my problem is that I can't prepare for anyone when I don't know who it is.
She doesn't have to technically tell you everyone that she's calling in what order. It's usually a courtesy to give some heads up. But at this point, I've pressed her, and that's all she's willing to do. So you have a list of the witnesses. You know the potential witnesses that are being called. So we'll be at recess till 9:30 tomorrow.
There's more live courtroom coverage coming up. Press subscribe now so you don't miss a second from the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today.